The desert sun blazed like molten fire above the crimson cliffs of southern Jordan, washing the landscape in hues of gold and rust. The air shimmered with heat, and not a single cloud dared to cross the sky. Beneath this unforgiving light, a small band of Nabataean nomads made camp at the edge of a canyon, a narrow passageway carved by centuries of wind and water. The year was around 300 BCE. For the Nabataeans, wanderers and traders of the desert, this place seemed like nothing more than another stop along their endless journey. But to one man, it was something more, a beginning. Haran, a young stonemason of the tribe, stood apart from the rest, his gaze fixed upon the towering rock face before him. The mountain rose like a fortress of flame-colored stone, its surface gleaming under the afternoon sun. Where others saw emptiness, Haran saw potential. The rock, he knew, was sandstone, soft enough to carve, yet durable enough to last through ages. To most of his kin, the idea of building into the mountain was madness. The Nabataeans lived freely, moving with their herds, trading spices and frankincense across the Arabian routes. Why imprison themselves within stone? But Haran had a different vision. The desert takes everything, he would say to anyone who would listen. Our water, our homes, our dead. But the stone, it remains. His words earned laughter from some, disapproval from others. The elders feared that to carve a city into the cliffs would anger the spirits of the desert. Yet Haran was not deterred. He had seen too much suffering, the storms that buried tents, the raiders that stole their goods, the parched mouths that longed for water. A city carved into rock could be hidden, protected, eternal. One evening, as the campfires flickered under a violet sky, Haran approached the chieftain, a broad-shouldered man named Rafik. "Give me 10 men," Haran pleaded, "and I will show you what the desert itself cannot destroy." Rafik studied him for a long moment before answering, "You wish to build a city in the bones of the earth. If the spirits favor you, perhaps it will stand." At dawn, Haran began his work. His tools were simple, iron chisels, bronze hammers, and the determination of a man possessed by a dream. The first strike echoed through the canyon, startling the camels nearby. Dust rose, fine as smoke, and sunlight danced on the raw face of the rock. With each strike, the cliff began to change, lines appeared, then patterns, then the first rough shapes of an entrance. Others watched with curiosity. Slowly, more men joined him. Some brought water, others tools, and before long, a team had formed. They worked by sunrise and rested by moonlight, their sweat mixing with the dust, their laughter echoing through the cliffs. From a single carved door grew a chamber, then a hall. The work was slow, but the progress was undeniable. The stone, once lifeless, began to breathe. As weeks turned into months, the Nabataeans began to see what Haran had envisioned. The carved walls offered cool shade even in the fiercest heat. When the desert winds raged, the chambers stood silent and unmoved. The tribe began to settle near the canyon, trading their tents for homes cut into the stone. Water channels, cleverly carved by Haran's direction, guided rainwater from the cliffs into hidden cisterns, ensuring life even in drought. One night, as the tribe gathered before their new stone dwellings, the cliffs glowed under the light of a full moon. The carvings shimmered like living flame, and the people fell silent in awe. Haran, his hands blistered and bleeding, stood beside his creation with quiet pride. His friend Malik, a merchant and storyteller, turned to him and whispered, "You have tricked the desert, Haran. You've made it serve you." But Haran only smiled faintly and said, "No, Malik. We have listened to it. The desert never destroys, it tests. It hides its secrets in plain sight for those brave enough to carve them free." That night, Haran sat alone by the canyon's edge. The stars burned bright above the desert's endless expanse, and he felt a strange peace settle over him. He imagined generations yet unborn walking these same carved halls, their laughter echoing through chambers still smelling faintly of dust and iron. He could almost hear their voices calling back to him across the centuries. "We are not carving stone," he whispered to the wind, his eyes glistening. "We are carving eternity." And as the wind swept through the narrow canyon, carrying his words deep into the mountain's heart, the rock itself seemed to hum in reply. Thus began the city that would one day be called Petra, the rose-red city half as old as time. Decades passed, and what began as one man's dream had transformed into a masterpiece of stone and spirit. Petra, the hidden jewel of the desert, rose from the cliffs like a vision. The narrow passage that led into the city, later known as the Seek, wound through towering red walls that glowed with sunlight, guiding travelers into a world no one expected to find in the middle of the wilderness. From the first steps into Petra, one could feel that it was no ordinary settlement. The Nabataeans had done the impossible, they had tamed the desert. The walls were carved with intricate patterns, faces of gods, and symbols of protection. Towers and tombs seemed to grow out of the rock itself, blending nature and human craftsmanship so perfectly that the two became inseparable. At the heart of this wonder stood Haran, now an old man, his once black hair turned silver like the sands under moonlight. His hands, once strong enough to carve through stone, now trembled with age. Yet his eyes still burned with the same fire that had driven him all those years ago. Where there had been emptiness, he now saw a thriving city, a place of trade, worship, and life. Petra had become a crossroads of the ancient world. Traders arrived daily with caravans loaded with frankincense from Arabia, silks from China, glass from Syria, and gold from Egypt. The air was alive with the calls of merchants, the scent of burning spices, and the echo of languages from far-off lands. The Nabataeans, once wanderers, had become masters of commerce, controlling the desert trade routes that connected empires. Haran often sat near the great facade of Al-Khazneh, the treasury, watching the movement of people below. He had designed its foundation years ago, though younger artisans had completed its grandeur under his son Malik's guidance. The structure's pillars soared skyward, its carvings capturing the light so perfectly that at dawn it appeared to glow from within. Visitors would stop in awe, whispering that the gods themselves must have built it. One afternoon, Haran found Malik overseeing new work along the cliffs. The younger man's arms were strong, his chisel sharp, his eyes sharp as his father's once were. Malik turned as he heard his father's cane tapping against the stone. "You should rest," he said, smiling. Haran chuckled. "Rest? How can a man rest when the city still grows? Look around you, Petra is alive. The desert sings now, not with the wind, but with the voices of our people." Malik smiled, but there was unease in his eyes. "Yes, father, but not all songs last forever. The Romans expand eastward. Their soldiers walk the same routes as our traders. They bring law, taxes, and swords. Soon they'll want Petra too." Haran's expression softened. He looked up at the treasury, the masterpiece that had outlasted every storm. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Empires rise and fall. But stone remembers. When their names are dust, these cliffs will still whisper ours." That night, as the torches lit the walls in golden light, the people gathered for a festival. Music echoed through the canyon, drums beating like the heart of the desert. Dancers moved among the firelight, their shadows flickering across the carved facades. Haran watched from a balcony, his heart full. He saw children playing, merchants laughing, lovers walking beneath the stars, and he knew that what they had built was more than a city. It was a sanctuary. As he watched, he felt Malik's hand on his shoulder. "You were right," his son said softly. "We have built eternity." Haran smiled faintly. "Not eternity, my son, just a mark upon it." Years slipped by like sand through fingers. The Romans did come, their banners bright against the desert sky. But they did not destroy Petra. They saw its beauty, its wealth, and its power, and instead, they claimed it. Yet even under Roman rule, the Nabataeans thrived. Their culture merged with the empires, their gods standing alongside Jupiter and Venus. Petra became a symbol of harmony between worlds, a place where the east and west shook hands in the shadow of ancient cliffs. In the end, Haran lived to see Petra at its zenith. When he passed away, the people buried him within the very walls he had carved. Malik carved his father's tomb high in the sandstone, where the light of every sunrise would touch it first. On the day they sealed the chamber, Malik whispered, "You taught us that stone can live. And as long as Petra stands, father, so will you." And as the wind sighed through the canyons and the sun set in waves of crimson and gold, the city of stone glowed like a living flame, defiant, eternal, and waiting to be remembered. Centuries passed. Empires rose, burned bright, and vanished into dust. The Nabataeans were gone, their names faded into forgotten tongues, but their city, Petra, remained. The desert, patient and merciless, crept back to reclaim what had once been bustling streets. Sand filled the courtyards, buried the water channels, and silenced the laughter that once echoed between the cliffs. The Romans had come, and after them the Byzantines, and then the winds of time swept them all away. The trade routes shifted, merchants found new paths, and Petra, once the beating heart of the desert, fell into slumber. The great facades that had once gleamed in the sun grew dark with dust. The wind, once tamed by human hands, now whistled through the empty tombs like a mourner. In the deep silence of the Sikh, the narrow canyon leading into the city, the only sounds were the whispers of the past. The treasury stood tall and solemn, its carvings still proud, though the colors had faded. The amphitheater sat empty, where once thousands had cheered. The streets that had known the steps of traders, priests, and kings were now crossed only by foxes and the occasional wandering Bedouin herder. Yet even in ruin, Petra refused to die. The stones still glowed at dawn, still caught the evening light in soft, rose-red hues. The city that Haran and his people had carved into the bones of the earth seemed to breathe quietly, waiting to be remembered. More than 1,000 years passed before that memory returned. In the early 19th century, a young Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt rode through the harsh Jordanian desert. Disguised as a Bedouin named Sheikh Ibrahim, he had heard whispers from the tribes about a lost city hidden among the mountains, a city of stone, carved by ancient hands. Most dismissed it as legend. But Burckhardt, driven by curiosity and the hunger of discovery, was determined to find it. The journey was perilous. He crossed barren plains and dry wadis, surviving on dates and sips of muddy water. The heat blistered his skin, and the sandstorms blinded his eyes. But one day, guided by a local Bedouin, he entered a narrow canyon flanked by towering walls of red rock. The deeper he went, the cooler the air became, and the light dimmed to a golden glow. The passage twisted like a serpent, and then, suddenly, it opened. Burckhardt froze. Before him rose a facade unlike anything he had ever seen. Columns 2 stories high, intricate carvings, a doorway that seemed to lead into another world. The treasury, Al-Khazneh, stood silent, bathed in sunlight, its beauty almost unbearable. Burckhardt's heart pounded. He whispered, "A city lost to time." The Bedouin beside him crossed his chest and murmured a prayer, for to the desert tribes, Petra was haunted, a place of spirits and cursed gold. But to Burckhardt, it was a miracle. He had rediscovered the forgotten city of the Nabataeans, carved 2,300 years before. In the years that followed, scholars, travelers, and archaeologists came from across the world. They brushed the sand from the steps, traced the weathered carvings, and studied the ancient scripts. They found evidence of canals, temples, and tombs, proof of a civilization far ahead of its time. Historians marveled at the Nabataeans' engineering, how they had controlled water in one of the driest places on earth, how they had turned cliffs into cathedrals, and how they had balanced art and survival with perfect grace. Even as modern footsteps echoed through the same canyons, the spirit of Haran and his people seemed to linger. Tourists marveled at the same facades, their cameras clicking where once chisels struck. The treasury still stood, untouched by centuries, and the royal tombs still caught the sunrise first, just as Malik had planned for his father's resting place. At sunset, the light turned the cliffs to fire. The city glowed as if alive, whispering across time to those who would listen. For Petra was not merely a ruin, it was a memory made solid, a song carved in stone. And though the desert winds would still blow, though centuries would continue to pass, the dream of the Nabataeans would remain. Every traveler who walked through the Sikh would feel it, the sense that the city itself was watching, remembering. Perhaps Haran's words still hung in the air, carried by the breeze through every chamber and hollow. "We are not carving stone, we are carving eternity." And so it was. The city of Petra, once thought lost to time, still stands, shimmering in the desert sun, immortal as the dream that birthed it.